Certainly, I know at Family Life we have the Family and Relationship Centre, so we work closely with Peninsula Community Legal Centre, and highly recommend you connecting with these guys. They're great. All right, next up we have presentation 5 with Julius Oderberg and Danielle Tabacchiera. Oh, it was just the way I said it, wasn't it? I knew you were Danny. I'll call you Danny. It's easy. Classic Brendan, I know. So Julius commenced work with the Department of Justice in 2011 as a case manager, and over the next 6 years specialised in high-risk sex offenders on parole and post-sentence supervision orders. The last 6 years he's been in staff supervisory and location management positions, including overseeing both parole and court streams of community corrections services at various locations across the south, east and metro. You get around, Julius. You do. He also spent part of his time working within Youth Justice as a manager, team leader, case manager, and he's currently the manager at Moorabbin Community Corrections. And Danielle, Danny commenced with Community Corrections Services in 2015 as a case manager, working in various positions with the case management space, including as a prosecutor for corrections for 3 years. Danny's been predominantly based within Bayside and is currently based at Frankston working as a supervisor. Danny has a particular interest in working with high-risk male perpetrators of family violence and currently completing her graduate certificate of family violence through Chisholm. Here, you're the Chisholm poster girl, aren't you, Danny? In 2022, Danny researched and developed a specialised advanced case manager role for working with the highest risk perpetrators of family violence who are subject to court-imposed orders, and is hoping this role will commence later this year. Welcome, guys, to the stage. Can't wait to hear you duo.
I took for notes, but then remembered I didn't.
Yeah, we're on the fly here. So thanks. So I just want to start by saying thank you for having us. Acknowledging Rose, Louise, Brian, and everyone that's put today together. It's been a privilege being part of the integrated partnership since I came over to Bayside. So thanks for having us, and thanks for putting it together. And I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Bunurong, and pay respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge over 60,000 years of culture, including song, dance, food, storytelling, and I want to thank them for looking after the land, the waterways that we're on today, and acknowledging as well that it's a very difficult time for Aboriginal men, women and children hearing about the voice and both sides, so just acknowledging how challenging that is. So pay my respects to anyone here today, Aboriginal people here today. So today we're just going to kind of do a little run through. So I always hear, what do you guys actually do at corrections? Like, what happens behind the walls at corrections? So kind of hoping to demystify it a bit today. Did run this presentation the other day, went for an hour and 20 minutes, so I see Brian's panicking a bit. We've split it into court and parole, so we'll try and just run through court today, and we'll see how we go for time, and obviously willing to take any questions either now or after the session, so yeah.
So within CCS there are several business units. So we have our court assessment and prosecution service. So they are the ones who appear at court and corrections prosecute their own matters. So they are the ones who do that. We have our court stream. So court stream are the ones who supervise your community correction orders. So the ones that are in the community, in the title of the name. We have parole stream, and they supervise parolees. They complete parole suitability assessments. They as well also include post-sentence branch, so those offenders that are on supervision orders. They also oversee them. Professional practice streams, they oversee practice across the state. Every region has professional practice advisors, and we consult with them quite frequently and have things like risk and review meetings and stuff where we present different cases and kind of see what's going on and if there's anything else that can be done. And then we have the community work team, so they are the ones who organise, oversee, facilitate community work and programs within the community. for both court stream and parole stream.
Alright, so looking at these two, just kind of run through the roles. So you may see these at the bottom of some email signatures. Hopefully explain it so you understand who's who in the zoo. So we've got in court stream, we've got our case officers, so they're responsible for overseeing our low risk clients. So clients typically on reparation orders, so community work only orders, or they're deemed low risk at court through our risk assessment. Our case managers supervise men and women on community corrections orders that are deemed moderate or high risk, excluding sex offenders. Advanced case managers, so that role was created a couple of years ago with the mind of, there's been an increase in what we call CCO imp orders, which are CCOs that have an imprisonment component prior to the commencement of the order. So we saw a massive increase in those with the change in the suspended sentence laws. So this role was essentially created to help transition men and women out of custody. So if they've spent more than 30 days in custody, the priority for our advanced case managers to work through reintegration. So a variety of reintegration issues that is posed to people coming out of a period of imprisonment. They also manage our sex offenders on corrections orders. And then me, so I just provide location management, staff supervision, oversight, quality assurance to the court stream. Our parole stream, so our parole officers supervise what we call general, our general clients, so general offenders, so non-sex, non-violent. So these are typically, we see like white collar crime, drug trafficking, property crimes, things that may be violent but not against a person, kind of, if that makes sense. We have our senior parole officers who supervise a mix of both serious violent and sex offenders on parole. And our specialist case managers focus on sex offenders that are in the post-sentence space, which is a whole thing I won't get into, but happy to talk about it at the break. Very interesting civil scheme. So, and then our principal practitioners, the manager of court practice kind of, but for parole stream, so they provide quality assurance reviews, staff supervision for that stream and on parole, the parole case managers. So.
And Julius forgot to mention supervisors, but we do sit up in there, just under the MCPs. Next, please. So how do they come to corrections? How does community corrections become involved? So our friends at BPIFVP will arrest, will complete an arrest. They'll charge them. They will be either issued a summons for court, or they'll be released pending summons, which is then served on them at a later date, but I'm no expert in that space, I'll leave that to the experts for that one. Or they are remanded or bailed. And then a court date will be issued once they are issued the summons. And be prepared, probably one of the most frustrating process through the court system is adjournment, so you can have a matter that can just kind of drag on for a really extended period of time. So that can be frustrating. Yeah, adjournments are quite common.
So, so I was asked about the referral process. We only have one referral process, and that's the magistrate or the judge at the court. So what will happen is someone goes to court, magistrate will say, I reckon this person might be looking at a CCO or a corrections order. So they will initiate at court that assessment. So they'll say to CCS or corrections, got someone, I'm thinking about maybe these conditions. Can you sit down with them, have an assessment, determine A, if they consent, if they understand what an order is, if they're willing to engage in the treatment components of the order, if there's any barriers, and then what conditions would be most suited or most tailored to that person to reduce their risk of reoffending. So we do that assessment generally we get a lot of same days. So yeah, we're going to return this to court, we're going to stand it down, return it to court later in the day. So a lot of the time there's a very short turnaround, but we'll do that our court team specifically will do that assessment and then provide that to the court, and the magistrate or the judge has the final sign off. I think it's actually, they don't have to consent, but generally speaking, it's very rare that if they don't consent that the magistrate or the judge will make an order. But if we say they're unsuitable for an order, the judge it's up to the magistrate or the judge's discretion. So that does happen a bit where we say, well, we don't think this is the right path for this client, but the judge has that final sign-off.
Yeah, the court's definitely not bound by our recommendation, which is probably another quite frustrating element of the work within corrections. So there are several conditions that are available for CCOs. So all of these conditions that you see up there, an assessment must occur for. So we have mental health treatment, drug and alcohol treatment, which does include testing, and testing is done at random. Supervisions, that's where they come into the office and have appointments with their case manager. It's generally going to be like a once per week, and then as they progress through the order, their frequency will reduce. Programs to reduce reoffending, so there's several programs. We refer them through to our internal programs unit, and then depending on their risk and offence type, they'll determine which pathway they go down. But for a lot of the people that we work with at the moment, the predominant program that they're going to be looking at is amends behaviour change. There is non-association conditions, so we can recommend to the court that they don't have contact with specific people. You'll generally find this when they've got co-offenders, and we have done it as well, and we do it for some of those recidivist family violence perpetrators who will continue to breach their intervention orders. We then attach it to their CCO that they can't have contact with the AFM.
And sometimes you'll even get an order that says must comply with the conditions of an IBO as well.
So there is a curfew condition. So it's probably important to note that for a non-association and a curfew condition, they can't be on an order for any more than 6 months. So electronic monitoring, which is what EM stands for, that used to only really be available on community correction orders imposed in the county court or Supreme Courts. During COVID legislation changed, it became available within the magistrates court. There are not many. I think there's maybe only 2 or 3 possibly at the moment with who are on community correction orders that have electronic monitoring. It's very prominent within the parole space more than it is with CCOs. So curfew condition, quite self-explanatory. There is a bond condition as well, so they have to pay a monetary amount to the court. That's up to the court to decide the bond condition and the amount. If they don't pay that bond, it can be considered a contravention of their order. There is a judicial monitoring condition, so that's where they're going, they're presenting back to the court throughout the time on the order for the magistrate to have some oversight and to see how it is that they're going. So we find that we would really recommend this for people who have probably been quite non-compliant with CCOs in the past, and we are hoping that the imposition of judicial monitoring will help to improve compliance. If they know that they're answerable to the court quite frequently, and as well for those quite high-risk individuals who we think could be quite problematic. And there is area exclusions as well, so those are also tracked via electronic monitoring. And the conditions that have EM next to them, they can be imposed without electronic monitoring. And then how that is then managed becomes kind of a bit more difficult because you're just kind of relying on their sheer honesty and hopefully Victoria Police letting you know if they cite them anywhere that they shouldn't be. So those are the conditions on an order.
So, once they're deemed suitable for an order, they are allocated on the same day. As I mentioned before, they're allocated based on risk level, offence type, and whether they've served a portion of that custody. So what we do at induction, we need someone to be cited within 2 days of commencing their order, and we need to have completed their full induction within a week. So it's basically, it's role clarification. You know, we get a lot of people who've never been on an order, so we run through the rules and regulations, the expectations, we run through what their order is, what their conditions are. It's not uncommon that people kind of black out at court, wake up and they're downstairs going, what just happened? What order, because it's so stressful, people, their lives are at stake almost. They're fearing they're going to custody when they go to court. So it's an extremely stressful time. So the first thing we do is run through, like, do you know what happened at court? Do you understand? Do you know what the conditions of the order are? Do you know what you can do, what you can't do? That's really, really critical, sets the scene. So we'll also, look at any IVOs that are current, especially for someone on an order for family violence. We'll be looking at whether they understand what interventions orders are current, what's expired, and then we'll go through emergency contacts and we'll complete what's called our level of service risk need responsivity, which is our risk assessment. It's kind of all-encompassing kind of risk assessment. How are we going to time? Plenty of time. Yeah.
So the case management process. So what happens? So this is where supervision. This is where the supervision condition comes into it. So we will do offence mapping, or what you'll hear people refer to as context of offending. So where we discuss kind of the before, during and after of the offence process. We're wanting to underknow, that's not even a word. We're wanting to understand, like the thoughts, the feelings, like the lead up, to try and really help them to unpack and understand what went into their behaviour and the decisions that they made that led them to commit that offence. Then we will intervention plan, so that then gives us like a not a framework, but a bit of structure as to how we're going to work with that person, what we are going to address, how we are going to address it, any responsivity needs that we need to take into consideration, things like mental health, housing issues, that sort of stuff, and supports that they have in place that can assist us to support them to get through their order. And then within that intervention plan as well is some case planning, so that's the goal setting. So we do set goals with them and they change throughout the life of the order as they achieve them. So our goals are set within the SMART principle. So it's supposed to be like a really achievable process for them. We have case conferences, or what you'll hear referred to as care team meetings. So we have those with whatever services are involved, MOD, child protection, mental health, Victoria Police, like you name it. I think I've been in care team meetings with them all, primary schools, kindergartens, everything. Our case management basis is on a strengths-based pro-social modelling with a strong focus on cognitive behavioural approaches. And we do that through use of workbooks as well as just general conversation and intervention with them. There's a strong focus as well on risk management too, and then any escalations in risk, then we feed that up to relevant services. A lot of the time it's going to be Victoria Police that we're feeding that up to, as well as things like child protection or anyone else who's kind of involved with that person or that family. If they're non-compliant, then there are different compliance steps that we can take. Probably one of the main ones before we kind of get back to court is that compliance review hearing, or a CRH, which is where we will refer them and they sit with us as a case manager, with the regional general manager, and they're going to talk about why it's not working and what can be done to try and get them back on track as a kind of last step before we get back to court. We review cases all the time. We have like twice weekly risk and review meetings. We debrief with each other, which is kind of informal reviews. We have formal reviews with supervisors in supervision. And then if we need to, so if someone has judicial monitoring or if someone breaches, then we do need to report back to the court where required, and the court can at any time ask us for a progress report, so then we can report back to them then.
I might, if we've just got a couple of minutes, I might skip to like contravention, just so you got, there it is, yeah. So I think the overarching principle for us is a corrections order. I guess it's designed to keep people out of prison, really. So there's community work is kind of seen as the only punitive or punishment component, which is changing now as well. We've got different courses that people can do that count, but essentially it's trying to get someone to address the reasons that brought them before the court and provide therapeutic intervention to reduce the likelihood of reoffending. So that's what like our major goal is, and that's what we hope for all of the clients that come through. Obviously that, that's the best case scenario. We have lots of people who breach their order through failure to comply with the conditions or through further offending. And I guess what I wanted to kind of touch on is, I had someone call me the other day and they're like, oh, you've got this guy on an order and he's not gone to 2 appointments and why isn't he back in jail? And I took some time to explain that that's not the philosophy we're looking at. So someone, when they're on a corrections order, we have so many people with trauma backgrounds. I'd say the majority of women that we have on corrections orders have either been victims of family violence or some form of abuse or trauma. The men, it's very similar. The men, we have really horrific backgrounds and horrific upbringings. So again, these are people that are reluctant to engage with services. We may trigger a trauma response. At Moorabbin, we're at the court building, so like the same place they almost thought they were going to go to jail, they come down and we have discussions about, behaviour change and modification and stuff. So it's a really tricky space, but what I'm trying to get at is, we don't breach people for missing 1 or 2 appointments. We really are always trying to get someone to come back and to re-engage when they've disengaged. That's like our absolute, that's what we always try to do. But, it absolutely gets to a threshold. They've missed 4 appointments, they've missed this, they didn't go to their compliance review hearing, there's nothing else we can do but return them to court. Further offences, we kind of legislated that we have to take them back to court, so there's very little pull with that. We do have an option for a discretionary contravention, but we use that if, someone's shop theft, something, and they get a $50 fine, and we can issue a discretionary breach, but generally further offences is a return back to court. So, and that doesn't mean we don't say, yeah, give them another shot. We think they'll be okay. They've stuffed up, but we want them to keep going. But they do have to go back to court, and that has to be presented in front of the magistrate. So, just wondering about time. We're done? Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So we missed about an hour's worth of other stuff that I was willing to talk about, but yeah, you can come grab me at any point.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Can bail you guys up over the networking lunch. So, yeah. But also you can send through those questions to Mentimeter, and again we will distribute these slides so you have contact details as well. So, yeah, please join me in thanking Julius and Danny.
Thanks for having us.